Welcome to the Giaour Podcast, a series of conversations between writer-director Rika Ohara, myself, composer Giaour Podmore, and members of the team drawn together to create a feature film based on Lord Byron's epic poem. In this episode, we'll be chatting to musician and actress Jie Ma. Jie plays a traditional Chinese instrument called the Pipa and will appear in the Giaour, both in the soundtrack and on screen. Hi Jie, what drew you to play a traditional Chinese instrument originally, and what brought you to the United States?
I was born in a musician's family, the second generation to play this instrument, specifically the traditional Chinese way. My mother was my first teacher and a well-known educator and a performer in our region. That's how I started. I do not believe that drew me to play, but it was a family setting, and you were born in that environment. It's very natural for me. Mm-hmm. And your second question is what brought me to the U.S. I came to the United States in 2004 for personal reasons.
It's something that we've touched on in previous episodes about the Asian people that live in the US and how that's an important part of American life that is not really covered elsewhere. Rika, along the same lines, why did you bring a Chinese musician into a film set in the Ottoman Empire?
My thinking is that, that it's an Ottoman Empire. The empires are by definition multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multilingual. They did a similar thing with Anna Karenina, bringing in an Indian woman. She is there because Tsarist Russia was so vast and its influence was so widespread, and that brought in so many people. And that's a similar thinking. And at the same time, while I was writing the Giaour, I was familiar with Jie. I saw her several times play around Los Angeles, and there is something so stunningly, captivatingly cinematic about the way she plays. I mean, she is beautiful to look at, and also, there's this fierce concentration when she plays, and I really wanted to get that in there. And at the time, I was researching the early Hollywood Orientalism, and there was Thief of Baghdad, 1924, with Douglas Fairbanks, and Anna May Wong was playing a Mongol slave. So they were just taking liberties with this idea of empire, with people from far away making an appearance in Arabia or whatever. And so I said, we can do that.
So the Mongol slave is a role that's actually written for Jie. Speaking of which, Jie, is your instrument, the pipa, related in any way to Mongol or even Manchurian music rather than classical Chinese music?
I would say no.
Okay.
But interesting enough, I'm half Manchu. Maybe you guys don't know, my mother is Manchu. So more or less, there's some culture influence and some trace in our musical life and life in general.
From my knowledge of Manchu culture, horses play an extremely important part. Is there an aspect of horse riding and horsemanship involved in playing the pipa? Is it possible to play the pipa on horseback?
Well, I have never tried that, but historically, if you look at some arts, some poem and other form of arts, it mentioned that Manchu and the Mongolian people back then, those two groups have a lot in common, and the horse, this animal, become one of them. And because Manchu and the Mongolian people, they used to use horse as a transportation in terms of daily life and war, and that's symbolic of freedom, I believe. Another interesting fact, it's not about me. I'm just saying it's interesting. The horse in Chinese people's life, not only Manchu or Mongolian, but overall, we believe in the zodiac signs, and like horse is one of them. I was born in a horse year, and my last name Ma, M-A. In Chinese, one of the meanings of that character is horse. So it's very interesting. All the dots connected.
That's fascinating. But it's a lot of very strong connections, isn't it? That's really
That is
interesting.
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. Your name.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I was little, when I play Pipa, they call me Little Horsey. But go back to Juno's question that we saw some images of, especially women, play Pipa on the back horse. There was a famous story. It's called Wang Zhao Jun Chu Sai. Means there's a princess whose name is Zhao Jun Wang, and she was arranged to marry to a leader outside of the main Han area. And she left her hometown and she couldn't bring anything but a pipa. That's her instrument, and that instrument carried everything she knew about her own culture, which is Han, H-A-N. And the music includes literacy and cultural reference, and also the music and the poem, the aesthetic perspective for that princess. So it's not only a pipa, but a symbol to travel from China to frontier. They call back then is called Guanwai frontier. To me, it's similar. I feel like I brought a Chinese music to United States, similarly to history, but history is always evolving and repeating on the same, pattern but different level. That's my perspective on this. Yes.
So why not do that to Europe too? I mean, everything came from China. Gunpowder, silk, noodles, and why not music? It's so much easier to transport, and it carries so much about the culture, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I believe there's some connections between Far East music culture and the European culture. For example, the mandolin, the oud, the pipa, they actually all belong to the same family. And through Silk Road, as you mentioned, silk, right? The Silk Road was the first marketplace in the world, and people exchange ideas, culture, and information through that. The farthest end the Silk Road reached was in Europe, actually Rome, if I didn't record it wrong. So I believe there's some musical exchange, but because of the areas and the difficulties of travel back then, I think it's not as much as Asian Middle East activity, not as often as that, but yeah.
Something that I've worked with the melodies for the Giaour was the relationship between the Chinese modes, the 5 modes of Chinese harmony, and the 7 Greek modes. And in the way that they're structured, okay, the Greek ones have 2 more notes, but in the structure of having a set series of pitches and you start the mode from another step in the scale, it's exactly the same system. For example, the tune that I've used is an Old English folk song called The Drowned Lover, is written in the Dorian mode, but works perfectly well in the Yu mode in the Chinese system.
When Jono told me, I got this English folk song, I said, okay, it's called The Drowned Lover. That's too perfect. And then, I thought maybe Jono rearranged it because it sounded so perfect on your pipa.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe, Jay, could you tell us a little bit more about the 5 modes? Can you play all 5 of them on the pipa?
Among all the Chinese instruments, pipa is the most capable one in terms of different modes and keys and method of playing for wide range. So yes, pipa can play all the Chinese modes, and on top of that, because of the structure of the instruments, it can play most of every melody you can find around the world. It's just a tool, but it does has its own characteristics. For my music journey, I have played not only traditional Chinese music, but world music and Western classical setting as a soloist with symphony ensemble. And I actually learned folk tunes from different places, and more or less there's some similarities and music sharing some common, not only emotion, but sometimes you be puzzled or pleasantly surprised. There is some very similar emotion expressed by music from different corner of the world.
Absolutely. That is fascinating. And since I composed that piece and worked it for the Pipa, I've done a lot more research into Ethiopian music. And Ethiopian harmony is also pentatonic and has almost exactly the same scales as the Chinese system, which is really fascinating.
It is.
Jono, I also detected gagaku chords in your other tune you wrote for the Giaour, the Lament for Layla. Can you explain that?
Well, gagaku comes from high court music of the Japanese court when Japan was incredibly rich because it was the very end of the Silk Road. It's a musical form which is seen as quintessentially Japanese, but actually with a bit of research, it turns out it has flavors from all the stops all along the Silk Road. So that there's a very strong harmonic connection with Chinese music and even Indian music in gagaku. Also, of course, the Indian connection is very strong with Buddhism. At the origins of gagaku, they were very, very proud of its exoticism. So that's why that harmony works really particularly well for the Giaour, because we are linking together all these different stories through the depth and breadth of the Ottoman Empire.
The one element I heard about that for gagaku is that it's harmony played by shou or sheng in Chinese. That reed instrument is supposed to sound like the cry of Karyobinga, this winged creature that is connected with sirens in Greece.
That instrument it's like a harmonica that you only see it really in Chinese, Korean and Japanese culture. It was a series of vertical pipes that you blow into, but there are some fantastic players of that instrument these days. And it can produce this otherworldly screech. It's a very kind of very emotive sound. Here's an excerpt from Layla's Lament with the high strings echoing the shou and the cries of the Karyobinga.
When we got together in Los Angeles in the studio to record some music, you showed me this move called playing the guitar. Could you please explain that?
Yes, in Tai Chi we have a very, very important posture, very important form that is one of the common forms with all the different sorts of Tai Chi. Everyone knows this position called play guitar. But if you look at the proper Chinese characters, it's play the pipa. When I met Jie and we talked about it, what was really interesting was that you hold your hands as if you're playing a musical instrument, but you sit back. You have to sit back to hold this position. And Jie told me that you can only play the pipa sitting down. It's not a standing instrument. And even just today to say that the pipa itself is a symbolic carrier of the entirety of Chinese culture, of Han Dynasty culture, it adds extra weight and importance to the name.
You have studied Tai Chi too, Jie, right?
Actually, I have not, but my grandfather was a hardcore Tai Chi practitioner, if I put it that way. So my entire childhood, I wake up knowing my grandfather already did his daily Tai Chi at 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
Wow. That's hardcore.
He does that at 4 a.m. He does Tai Chi in our yard, courtyard, and it was a lovely image. It's like a film, especially when it's winter. The snowflakes are falling down, and my grandfather has white beard and doing those Tai Chi in the snow. And so early, like the world has nothing else but his own world. I think that's essence of one of the essences of Tai Chi practice. But myself, no, I've been watching, and I think Juno is brilliant.
Thank you very much. It's never too late to start.
Yes, it's exercise, but also it's a philosophy translated to a movement. That's my opinion of Tai Chi, although I don't practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the application of very profound Taoist beliefs into physical movement.
Certainly.
Beautiful.
And I also think Tai Chi is a set of ideas that can be implemented to our daily life. Whatever we do, a lot of philosophies or ideas or way of perceiving things, I think it's all related to Tai Chi if you perceive it that way. It will be healthier and a better life,
Absolutely. Well, you've just done my salesman work for me. That's the best advert. Best advert for Tai Chi I've heard in years.
You have been listening to the Giaour Podcast by the creators of the feature film based on Lord Byron's 1813 best-selling poem. I am the writer-director Rika O'Hara, and
I'm composer John O'Podmore. Rika has been joining us from Los Angeles while I'm here in London. Thank you again for listening, and look out for the next episode of the Giaour Podcast.